I think Lando Norris did speed in the pit lane at the Japanese Grand Prix. But before we get to that, we've got to speak about McLaren's overall strategy, which wasn't nearly as bad as everyone thinks it was. But before we get to that, we also have to talk about the Japanese Monaco Grand Prix. There was only 18 changes of position for the entire race. That's start position versus end position. And when you compare that to somewhere like China, the graph is just very, very different. It was on a par with Monaco. Last year's Monaco Grand Prix had also 18 changes of position total start versus finish. It wasn't the best race, I think it's fair to say. Now on to McLaren then, and honestly, they got a lot of stick at the Japanese Grand Prix for perhaps not getting a strategy night, not introducing team orders, things like that. But they actually nailed it. McLaren themselves could not have done any better in the Japanese Grand Prix. The drivers, a different matter. So in terms of their strategy then, you can see they pit there, after the F1 data issue, which throws off the lap counter, ignore that, they're still having issues. But if you see, Piastri obviously pits first there, but he gains about a second or so on the leaders when he pits. So the undercut was definitely there, it existed, and he probably would have gained even more the next lap once his tyres would have been all warmed up. So McLaren basically had to pit him then, otherwise there was a chance Leclerc could undercut him, and if Leclerc didn't manage to undercut him, he almost certainly would have undercut one of them if Leclerc pit on the lap that Piastri pit and Piastri didn't. So they were sort of forced to pit at least one of them to guarantee staying ahead of Leclerc. And we've already covered that it was the Japanese Monaco Grand Prix you couldn't overtake. So they had to make sure they stayed ahead of Leclerc because he was close at this phase of the race. And then once they pit him, they were sort of forced to pit Norris as well because Leclerc was always going to pit. So again, you can't risk him getting undercut by Leclerc. So best case scenario, you can leave Norris out for one extra lap and probably still come out ahead of Leclerc. But that probably would have meant Oscar Piastri got past him in the pits, which obviously would have also been a no-go. You can't really prioritise the second car, although with hindsight, maybe they should have given that a go. So they were sort of forced into that strategy. The only thing they could have possibly done was ran one of the cars massively long. That clearly wasn't going to be Oscar Piastri. You can see he started to fade away there a little bit. His tyres started dying. So maybe they could have run Norris super long, but that would have put him behind Leclerc, probably would have put him behind Russell. He would have been really on the back foot, having to overtake multiple cars at the end there when it was clear you just couldn't overtake at the Japanese Grand Prix. McLaren could not have done anything different on strategy. Sure, if you want to go all in for a win, maybe they could have tried something, but P2 and P3 is still an unbelievably good result, and they were still close to Max. There was still a chance that we could possibly overtake him on track at the point they pit. But, of course, it was looking like they couldn't. And that's where we got onto the team order situation. Now, Oscar Piastri did seem to be the faster driver slightly in the race. He was certainly able to get a lot closer to Norris than Norris was able to get to Max. There was even once or twice that Piastri possibly had half a chance at overtaking Lando Norris, although did never get side by side with him. So the argument is there that Oscar Piastri should have been allowed past Lando Norris to see if he could overtake Max Verstappen. And honestly, from McLaren's point of view, that makes a lot of sense. It's clear, really, once you get to the last 10 laps, that Lando Norris cannot even get within 1 second of Max Verstappen, let alone overtake him. It was not going to happen, categorically. There's no point giving him more time. It's clear that wasn't going to happen. So, all right, we want to try and win this race. Let Piastri through, and let's see if we can maybe have a chance at getting him. And of course, if Piastri doesn't get him, you swap back. Makes sense. But put yourself in Lando Norris' shoes. There's no way in hell Lando Norris was ever going to allow that. Because best case scenario for Lando Norris, Piastri fails and then Piastri drops back behind him. The positions are exactly as they are now anyway. Worst case scenario for Lando Norris, Piastri manages to overtake Max, and all that's good for the team, it means Lando Norris goes from gaining 3 points on Oscar Piastri to losing 10 points. And when you know that your teammate is probably your biggest title rival, possibly alongside Max Verstappen, we'll see how the performance of the Red Bull evolves over the season, you're never going to do that. So I think McLaren kind of figured that out and were like, we would like that to happen, but there's no way it's going to happen. It's going to annoy Norris, yada, yada. Let's just not do anything. And honestly, although we probably all would have liked to see Piastri have a go, to at least have a chance at an overtake for the lead, again, just like the pit stop strategy, they really had no choice in the matter. So honestly, McLaren absolutely nailed the Japanese Grand Prix. They did everything perfect. Even the pit stops. 2.3 seconds was Lando Norris's pit stop versus Max Verstappen's 3.3 second pit stop, which is why they ended up side by side. Which is where we move on to the drivers, the McLaren drivers, who did not have a perfect weekend. Let's start in qualifying. First of all, Oscar Piastri, he was 3 tenths down on Max Verstappen at the end of the first sector. Just didn't quite get the first sector right. He did manage to close it back in to within half a tenth, which is amazing. Really good job by him to close it in, but just made that mistake. So not an ideal qualifying for Piastri, but not bad either. Norris actually was unbelievably 2 tenths up on Max Verstappen as he came into the final chicane. He was just really cautious on the brakes in the final chicane. If he wasn't as cautious on the brakes and just did average final chicane, he would have comfortably been on pole position. He lost over 2 tenths to Max Verstappen in that one final chicane. Big mistake, really, in the grand scheme of things, because it was just cautiousness. It wasn't like a small lock-up or a little mistake, little slide, gust of wind. It was just cautiousness. He just braked too early. That's all it is. So yeah, neither driver did great in qualifying. Max should have been P3. The McLaren driver should have been 1 and 2. But look, it was small margins. We know Max is incredibly in qualified, and I actually threaded about this the other day. Max is the best driver in F1 right now, and it is not even close. He is just the best. Full stop. End of story. No debate needed. So yeah, Max is unbelievable, but the McLaren driver should have beaten him in quali. Then, of course, you get to the race. And honestly, I feel like Piastri had a pretty much perfect race. I mean, there wasn't a lot more you could do. It's impossible to overtake. He did seem to be faster than Norris. He was getting close. He got within DRS range a lot of the time. There was a couple of half chances at an overtake. He was asking questions of the McLaren pit wall. You know, he did a pretty much flawless race. His only issue was being 0.04 of a second slower than Norris in qualifying. Norris, on the other hand, not as good. Don't get me wrong, he finishes P2, no mistakes, it's not a bad race. But he wasn't as quick as his teammate, it seemed, in the Japanese Grand Prix. He was never really able to get anywhere near Max Verstappen to go for a move. But then you get to the pit lane exit. Finally getting to what we said at the start of the video. Now, as I said, McLaren did a 1 second pit stop quicker, 1 second quicker than Red Bull's pit stop, which is why I was able to get side by side in the first place. Now, Lando Norris, as far as I can tell by this footage, does speed in the pit lane. So this is the last frame of the video from YouTube that he has got the pit limiter enabled. You can clearly see the pit exit line. The next frame, the screen is kind of disabling. As we skip on a couple more frames, you can see he's clearly disabled the pit limiter before his entire car has left the pit lane, denoted by that white line. Now, obviously, you assume the pit limiter is programmed to be 59.9 kilometers an hour, as close to the limit as they dare go. So pretty much the second that pit limiter gets disabled, the car will start accelerating. And it doesn't take an F1 car very long to accelerate by 1 kilometer an hour. So I can pretty much guarantee you that the back end of Lando Norris's car was doing more than the pit lane speed limit, or was it 80k in Japan, whatever, before it left the pit lane. Now, clearly, this was never investigated. I don't think it necessarily means that the FIA missed it. They may just maybe only measure it on the front wing. Is it just your front wing, the front of your front wing, that has to be not speeding? Or maybe it's your cockpit that has to be not speeding. I don't know. And I can't even really find the exact how this all works, to be honest. But he definitely, the rear of his car was going quicker than the speed limit while it was still in the pit lane. Seems weird, doesn't it? Look, it's not the end of the world, because if it's the same for everybody in the happy days, but I think if everyone knew you could disable the pit limiter the second your front wheels cross the line, everyone would be doing that. There was a reason that Max moaned about it over the radio, and he was right, because he waited that much longer to disable it, which meant the rear of his car wasn't speeding in the pit lane. But I think this is something the FIA need to look into, don't you? Because, you know, it shouldn't just be, well, maybe it should just be a certain part of your car, but clearly Max doesn't think that's the rule. I think it should be your entire car can't speed. Why have they not just got a radar that crosses the pit exit right on the line, and if any car is seen to be going over it, then that's speeding? Maybe it's that Max Verstappen's car was side by side, so he got away with it. I don't know. It's absolutely clear to me, though. The rear end of his car was speeding. Very strange. Very strange. I think he got a little bit lucky. And honestly, this really gets down to the nuts and bolts of Norris maybe not having the best race, because he did disable that pit limiter early, and arguably should have been done for it. And if he was done for it, he'd have got a 5 or 10 second penalty, probably, which would have put him behind Oscar Piastri. And okay, he still would have been on the podium, but that's costing him. So that would have been a very silly mistake to make. But okay, all right, he's going for the win. Fair enough. He's going for the win. He's side by side. But that, you know, everyone in the world could see he was never going to be given room by Max Verstappen, so he decides to drive onto the grass. Remember how wet it was before the start? There was quite a big rain shower before the start of the race. There was wet patches at the start of the race. That grass could have been like ice. He could have slid on that, spun, got into the wall. I know we're getting into what ifs now, but that was quite risky to do that. If you want to win a world championship, you don't need to take those kind of risks. But anyway, just before we round out, let's have a look at the championship standings then. So there you can see Lando Norris leads by 1 point over Max Verstappen, Oscar Piastri 13 points back. George Russell, low-key having a great season, only 17 points back from the championship lead after 3 races. That is not bad. Constructors' Championship, you can see what McLaren are prioritising right now. They now lead by 36 points over Mercedes and then 50 points over Red Bull. So they decided that P2 and P3 were enough. On to the alternative standings then, and the Olympic medal system shows the results. And it is Lando Norris, the only driver to stand on the podium in every single race so far, and 3 different winners from the first 3 races, which is the first time that's happened since 2013. Positions gained, yeah, hasn't changed too much. Ocon still doing a decent job on the positions gained, along with Antonelli, but really that's a reflection of quali position, so we'll see how that evolves across the season. Average gap to win, yeah, again, hasn't really changed. Max has obviously gone down, but overall hasn't really changed too much, but that's enough numbers. Don't forget to drop a sub, guys, if you haven't already, and I will catch you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.